The sharp sound of shattering glass cut through the dinner table just as Evelyn Harper stood to pour her daughter another glass of water. Laura looked at her mother, her smile thin as a blade. "Mom, maybe it's time you let someone else handle the finances. You can't really keep track of numbers anymore, can you?" The table erupted in laughter. Only Evelyn stood frozen. The candle in the center flickered, casting her shadow long across the wall, like a soul being pushed out of its own home. The room glowed with warm light, but inside, Evelyn, there was only coldness. On the table, the vegetable soup she had cooked since morning had gone cold. Ryan, her son-in-law, leaned back in his chair, his tone laced with arrogance. "Honestly, Mom, you should rest. Let us manage things for you. The bank account's the old house in Hawthorne. Keeping it all must be tiring." Evelyn set her spoon down her hand, trembling slightly, but her eyes remained dry. "What do you mean?" she asked slowly. Ryan smiled. "We just want what's best for you. After all, you're not really using those assets. You should think about our future, about your granddaughters, too." The whispers around the dinner table stretched like a rope tightening around her neck. Laura feigned tenderness, placing a piece of fish on her mother's plate, but her voice was sharp. "I only want you to be comfortable, Mom. We're going through a rough time. Ryan's project is short on funds. If you let us handle the paperwork for the Riverside house, everything will be fine." Evelyn looked at her daughter, the child she had once held through sleepless nights now speaking to her like a stranger. "That house is where your father died. It's where you grew up." "I know," Laura said flatly, eyes averted, "but emotions don't pay the bills." Evelyn fell silent. The only sound was the heavy ticking of the wall clock. In that moment, she realized something had collapsed, not the house, but her trust. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, she opened the small drawer and took out a thick, cream-colored envelope. The red seal of the Central Bank of Portland was still fresh, her name printed clearly, Property Transfer Agreement, Evelyn Harper. Inside were the ownership certificates for 3 commercial buildings and a lakeside villa in Oswego, all assets left to her by her brother George. She traced the edge of the paper, remembering the words in the letter he had sent with it. "Evelyn, don't tell anyone until you see who truly stands with you." Back then, she had laughed. Now she couldn't. The next morning, Laura walked into the kitchen wearing her usual mask of fake concern. "Mom, remember your appointment with the psychologist today?" Evelyn smiled faintly. "You arranged that?" "Yes, the doctor said we should reevaluate your memory. It's just a formality." From the living room, Ryan called out, "And Mom, you should sign the financial authorization papers. It'll make managing your expenses easier. We're just trying to help." Evelyn glanced at the document in their hands, her eyes landing on the fine print at the bottom. Full authorization over the management and use of assets. She looked up, her expression calm and unreadable. "I'll sign," she said softly. Laura exhaled in relief, her smile returning. "That's wonderful, Mom. You're so wise." Evelyn turned away, hiding the flash of steel in her eyes. In her coat pocket, the bank envelope remained heavy as a silent vow. That afternoon, after they left the house, she went to the nearby park. Golden leaves swirled around the wooden bench. Evelyn pulled out her phone and called Sophia Blake, the attorney who had once worked with George. "I'd like to confirm the ownership of my assets." Sophia's voice was steady and clear. "Everything is legally under your name, Mrs. Harper. No one can touch it." Evelyn closed her eyes and exhaled. "Good. I just needed to be sure. Are you in trouble?" Sophia asked. "Not yet," Evelyn replied, "but soon." That evening, when Laura returned home, she found her mother cooking her face, gentle as always. "Mom, I think you should let me keep the key to your safe just in case you forget where it is." Evelyn wiped her hands and handed her a fake key, an empty copy. "Go ahead, dear. I trust you." Ryan grinned. "See Laura. Your mother's very reasonable." Evelyn watched them, seeing how certain they were that she was old and frail, believing the power in this house now belonged to them. But they were wrong. They didn't know that the woman they treated like a shadow in the kitchen held in her hands the ownership of everything that could change their lives. That night, wind howled through the trees outside. Evelyn sat at her desk and wrote the first line in a new notebook, Evelyn Harper's defense journal, starting today. She noted every detail, the coldness in her daughter's eyes, Ryan's condescending tone, the way her hand trembled when she picked up the pen, not from fear, but from fury. The quiet rage of a woman who had endured too much for too long. When the clock struck midnight, she closed the notebook. In the dim golden light, her face was clearer than ever, not the face of a weak mother under control, but of a woman awakening after years of silence. Outside, Portland lay still under a blanket of mist. Inside the small house, Evelyn smiled faintly. She had lied to her entire family, telling them she was broke. But in the darkness, that woman had just begun to take her life back. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the kitchen window, coating the house in a gentle glow. Evelyn stood by the stove, stirring a pot of oatmeal as steam rose like mist. Laura walked in her hair tousled, still wearing a silk nightgown that smelled faintly of expensive perfume. "Mom, I need to talk to you," she said, her tone edged with impatience. Evelyn turned her smile soft, but her eyes deep and unreadable. "What about dear about the house in Hawthorne?" Laura said, pulling out a chair to sit down. "I think it's best if you let me handle everything before there are any legal complications." Ryan came down the stairs, coffee in hand, joining in. "We spoke with the bank. If you sign over the authorization, we can take out another loan. I'm about to get funding for a new project. I just need a small deposit." "Isn't helping us what you've always wanted?" Mom Evelyn stayed silent, the spoon in her hand, tapping gently against the pot, steady as a heartbeat. Inside pain and contempt, mixed into something sharp and cold, bitter, yet strangely calm. "That house is currently being rented," she said slowly. "The bank has already verified it." "Rented?" Laura raised an eyebrow. "Who's renting it? I've seen the papers. The house is empty." Evelyn smiled faintly. "There are many things you haven't seen, Laura." Breakfast passed in heavy silence. Laura struggled to maintain her composure while Ryan hid his irritation behind a polite smile. When they finally left the house, Evelyn sank into a chair and sighed. Her mind drifted back to the years after her husband's death. Laura had been in her early 30s, then tearful and sincere, promising to take care of her mother. And Evelyn had believed her, believed enough to hand her access to her accounts, believing that love and family would be her protection. But little by little, the money disappeared. The valuables in the house vanished without explanation. Laura began calling her a burden. Ryan began issuing orders like the master of the house. Each time they said, "You forgot," or "You should rest." Evelyn felt herself being erased piece by piece from her own life. That afternoon, she walked to the small park where she used to sit with George. The air carried the scent of damp grass and fallen maple leaves. Beside the old bench, her elderly neighbor Clara Jameson was feeding pigeons. "Evelyn, it's been a while since I've seen you outside," Clara said kindly. Evelyn sat down, offering a weary smile. "The house feels suffocating." Clara gave her a knowing look. "Is it Laura again?" Evelyn nodded, her gaze distant. "They want me to sign papers. Every document they hand me, they say it's just a formality." Clara rested a hand on her shoulder. "Be careful. I've heard people can fake anything with a few sheets of paper. There was a woman down the street. Her son put her in a nursing home, then sold her house in 3 weeks. Evelyn said nothing, but her mind flashed to the signature line on the authorization document from the day before. She hadn't signed it, but she had promised she would. They would definitely be back for it. That evening, while Laura and Ryan went to a party, Evelyn opened her drawer and took out her small notebook, flipping to a new page. She wrote day 2. They mentioned selling the house. Laura's voice was calm. Ryan's anger was hidden. Both believe I'm weak. They mentioned memory issues. They might be preparing medical documents. Must contact Sophia soon. She paused, then looked up. In the mirror, her aging face was resolute. She whispered, "No one will take what George and I built with blood and years." Around 8 o'clock, her phone buzzed. A message from Laura read, "Mom, remember tomorrow the neurologist will come to the house. Don't worry, it's just a checkup." Evelyn stared at the screen for a long time, then replied with a single word, "All right." She looked out the window. On the quiet street, the lamplight glimmered on the wet pavement. Inside her chest, a plan had already begun to form. That night, Evelyn called Sophia. "I think they're about to make their move," she said softly. "They want a medical certificate claiming I'm incompetent so they can take guardianship." Sophia's response was quick. "Stay calm. Don't react yet. Do you have any evidence?" "Not yet," Evelyn said, "but I can create some." "Good. Record every conversation. I'll prepare legal protection for you. And Evelyn, if you ever feel unsafe, leave the house immediately." After the call, Evelyn sat alone in the dark. Her thoughts wandered to Laura, the daughter who once held her hand at her father's funeral and promised, "I'll never let you be alone." Now she was the one building a wall of cruelty between them. Evelyn let out a brittle laugh. "Strange," she murmured, "people change faster than Portland weather." Outside rain began to fall in steady drops. Evelyn stepped onto the porch, feeling the chill seep into her skin. She closed her eyes, breathing in the damp night air. Inside her heart, a quiet fire burned. She knew that by morning, when the so-called doctor arrived, when Laura smiled her fake smile, and when Ryan placed the papers in front of her, they would face a different Evelyn, one who no longer trembled, no longer felt lost. They would see a woman fully awake, no longer afraid of deceit, because she had already seen through them to their very core. When the clock struck 11, she cleared the table and turned off the lights. Only the faint glow of a candle remained in the living room. Evelyn slipped the bank envelope into a hidden compartment beneath the old rug and whispered to herself, "Let's see who loses their mind first, Laura." And as the rain fell steadily outside, her smile emerged, quiet, sharp, and full of calculation. Tuesday morning began with a loud, insistent knock at the door. Evelyn had just set the teapot down when Laura entered, followed by a man in a white coat. "Mom, this is Dr. Harris." Laura said, her tone sweet but her eyes sharp, giving silent orders. "He just wants to ask you a few questions." "Don't worry, okay?" Evelyn nodded, her smile so faint it was hard to tell if it was real. "Of course, dear. I have nothing to hide." Dr. Harris looked to be in his 50s. His salt and pepper hair neatly combed his expression uncertain as he met Evelyn's calm gaze. He opened his notebook and began with the usual questions. "Do you remember what day it is today?" Evelyn glanced out the window where sunlight filtered through the maple leaves. "Today is Tuesday, October 28th, she answered. "My daughter just brought you here to see me, so it must be a special day." He smiled slightly and jotted something down. "Good. Can you tell me your current address?" Evelyn recited it perfectly, then added, "And I also remember the property registration number for the house in Hawthorne if you need to verify it." Her words made Laura's shoulders twitch, her practiced smile faltering for a moment. Ryan stood behind her, trying to appear composed, but his fingers tapped nervously on the edge of the table. "Mom, don't stress. This is just a formality." Evelyn turned to him, her tone gentle. "I know, but every formality comes with consequences, doesn't it, son?" The room went quiet. After 10 minutes of questions, Dr. Harris closed his notebook and nodded. Mrs. Harper is perfectly lucid. I see no signs of cognitive decline. Laura forced a smile, her voice tight. Maybe she's hiding it. She's been forgetful lately. One day she even left the stove on. Evelyn chuckled softly, her eyes meeting her daughter's. That was the day you forgot to turn it off after making noodles. Remember, I put out the fire for you. Ryan shot Laura a warning look, his lips pressed thin. When the doctor left, Evelyn walked him to the door. Thank you for coming. I hope you won't get dragged into these petty family matters. He hesitated for a second, surprised by the firmness in her tone. As soon as the door closed, Laura turned to Ryan, her voice low but furious. He's not going to sign. We'll need someone else. She's pretending I swear. Old but cunning. Evelyn stood behind the wall, hearing every word. Her hand clenched tightly. That afternoon, she visited Clara. They sat in a small cafe by the roadside sunlight, pouring through the foggy window pane. Clara poured more tea and said softly, I knew it. They're trying to push you out. Evelyn nodded. They tried today, but it didn't work. I think next time they'll be more aggressive. Clara leaned forward, her eyes filled with concern. Do you have a plan? Yes, Evelyn said calmly. I'll let them think I'm weak until I finish what I need to do with Sophia. That evening, while Laura and Ryan were out at another party, Evelyn turned on her old computer in the living room and logged into an email account she had created long ago. In the sent folder, she reread her correspondence with Sophia Blake. I've prepared all the transfer documents. All assets are under my name, and no one can alter them without my notarized signature. Below it was Sophia's reply. Good. I advise you to start gathering evidence of financial manipulation. The more specific we are, the stronger your case will be. Evelyn stared at the screen, the light reflecting in her eyes, cold, unwavering, determined. That night, she added a new entry to her notebook. Day 3. They're panicking. My daughter is starting to fear me. She doesn't understand that the more she pushes, the clearer my mind becomes. The next morning, Ryan left early while Laura stayed behind. She brought a cup of coffee and placed it in front of her mother. Mom, I'm sorry about yesterday. I lost my temper. I just worry about you. I'm afraid someone might take advantage of you. Evelyn looked at the cup, the faint scent of vanilla rising from it, familiar yet suspicious. How strange, she said softly. I don't remember you ever making coffee for me before. Laura forced a small laugh. I'm trying to change. From now on, let me take care of you. Evelyn lifted the cup, inhaled lightly, then set it down. Thank you, dear, but today I'd rather have tea. Laura froze her face, tightening. You don't trust me, do you? I do, Evelyn said evenly, but I don't want to lose sleep. Coffee keeps me awake. The simple remark left Laura speechless. When her daughter left the room, Evelyn poured water into the cup, watching the dark liquid swirl before pouring it down the sink. She didn't know what was in it, but a mother's instinct told her nothing about it was innocent. By afternoon, Sophia called. I've scheduled an appointment with the notary. By Thursday, everything will be finalized. Evelyn nodded, though Sophia couldn't see her. After that, I'll move out. Do you have a place to go? Yes. George left me a small house by Lake Oswego. I'll go there. Good. They won't find you. That evening, while Laura watched television, Evelyn sat at the dining table and checked her small pocket recorder. She pressed play and Ryan's voice filled the air. We need to move fast. If she stays sharp, we won't be able to do anything. Laura's voice followed, cold and certain. Don't worry, the medicine will do its job. Evelyn turned it off, her eyes closing for a moment. What she felt wasn't fear, it was pain forged into steel. Near midnight, Laura went to bed while Ryan stayed in the living room watching the news. Evelyn quietly walked to the kitchen, opened a cabinet, and took out an old bottle of wine. She poured half a glass and stared at the amber liquid catching the light. "George," she whispered. "You see, don't you? I kept my promise. I won't let them destroy what you built." Outside, the wind picked up rustling through the trees like voices whispering in the dark. Evelyn turned off the lights, leaving only the dim glow of a single candle. In that flickering light sat a 70-year-old woman, silent and still, her hand resting on a thick notebook, the diary of her quiet rebellion. She knew the battle had only just begun, and this time she wasn't fighting for money. She was fighting for her dignity and her freedom. Rain had been falling since dawn, heavy drops drumming steadily against the window, blending with the slow, steady breathing of someone waiting. Evelyn sat at the dining table, a small recorder placed in front of her like a loyal companion. She replayed last night's conversation while carefully writing notes in her journal. Day 4. Audio evidence secured. Both voices clear. Must save a copy to the USB. She wasn't afraid, only enveloped by an eerie calm. After years of being treated like a burden, Evelyn understood that weakness was never a flaw. It was the perfect disguise for hidden strength. When Laura entered the room, her eyes darted toward the open notebook. "What are you writing, Mama Diary?" Evelyn looked up, her gentle smile as familiar as ever. "Just a few little things. The older I get, the more I fear forgetting. You should rest. Writing too much might exhaust you." Laura's laugh was thin, but Evelyn caught the flash of suspicion in her daughter's eyes. She closed the notebook and stood up. "You're right. I am a little tired." Ryan came in from outside holding his phone. "Good news," he said. "Dr. Thompson is ready to sign the medical certificate as soon as we give him the documents." Evelyn froze for a moment. She recognized that name. Thompson was Ryan's private doctor, the same man who had once helped him escape debt with a fake medical report. "And you should be careful about the people you use," she said softly. "Not everyone keeps secrets forever." Ryan raised an eyebrow. "Mom, why do you keep interfering? You just need to rest. Let me handle everything." Laura quickly softened her tone. "Come on, she's only trying to help us. Don't be so tense." Evelyn looked at them both, the puzzle pieces in her mind falling into place. They didn't just want her house, they wanted everything, including her legal authority. Once they had that medical certificate, they could make decisions on her behalf, even sell everything she owned. That afternoon, after they left, Evelyn called Sophia. They planned to use a fake doctor to get a mental incompetency certificate. She said, her voice low but steady. "I've recorded several of their conversations. I need to make sure everything George left me stays safe." Sophia replied firmly, "You've done exactly right. I'll send someone to back up your data. Thursday's notary appointment remains as planned. After that, they'll have no control over anything." Evelyn exhaled slowly. "I just worry they'll do something reckless before I can leave." That night, she sat alone in the dark, the only light coming from a flickering candle. The sound of rain outside was like stealthy footsteps. Memories rose in her mind, Laura's first cry the day she was born, that fragile sound that had once made Evelyn feel invincible. Then came the years of college, Laura calling home for money, promising she would make her mother proud. Evelyn had sent every dollar, even selling her jewelry, and now that same daughter was preparing to cast her aside like an old coat. Near midnight, she heard a car stop outside. Laura and Ryan spoke in hushed tones, but Evelyn caught every word. "Tomorrow," Ryan Laura said, "tomorrow's the last day. Once we get the certificate, we'll take her to the care facility. It's 2 hours away. No one will find her there." Ryan replied, "Perfect. She's got no one but us. The Hawthorne house and her pension will cover everything. I'll settle all debts within a month." Evelyn stood behind the door, her heart pounding, but her eyes cold. They thought she was weak, that fear would break her. What they didn't know was that she had already uploaded all the recordings to the cloud and shared them with Sophia and Clara. If anything happens to me, she had told Clara over the phone, send the files to the police. On Thursday morning, the rain had stopped, the sky still gray but streaked with light pushing through the clouds. Evelyn rose early, dressed in a pale blue dress, and tied her hair neatly. Laura came downstairs, startled. "Mom, are you going somewhere?" "Of course," Evelyn replied softly, "with you to see the doctor." Ryan's glance flickered between suspicion and smug confidence. As the car rolled through the wet streets, puddles reflected the pale light of morning. Evelyn sat silently, one hand resting on her purse. Inside, along with the property documents and a backup USB, was a small knife, something she carried only for reassurance. When they stopped in front of an old building marked Thompson Psychological Health Center, Evelyn smiled faintly. "You're really taking me here." "Of course," Laura said impatiently. "It's just a short checkup. You'll feel better after." Inside the office, Dr. Thompson appeared tall and thin, his smile practiced and false. "Mrs. Harper, I hear you've been forgetful lately. Just a quick evaluation." Evelyn met his gaze, her tone calm and firm. "No doctor. I remember things very clearly, especially those who use their profession to make money off deceit." Thompson hesitated, his smile faltering. "I don't know what you mean." Evelyn opened her purse and took out her small recorder. She pressed play and Ryan's voice filled the room. "The doctor said he'd sign as long as I give him the paperwork." Then Thompson's own voice followed. "Fine. I just need a sample of her old signature for comparison. The fee is $5,000. Thompson's face turned pale. Laura shot up from her chair. "Mom, where did you get that?" Evelyn's voice was calm. "From our own home." "You thought I wouldn't hear." Ryan lunged forward, reaching for the recorder, but Evelyn stepped back, her gaze sharp as a blade. "Don't even try, Ryan. I've already sent copies to my lawyer and the police. They're waiting for my signal." The room froze in silence. Thompson stammered, I was just following instructions." Evelyn cut him off. "You can leave now, and if you value your medical license, you'll make sure your name never appears on any of my records again." Laura sank into her chair, her face drained of color. "Mom, I didn't mean any harm. I just wanted to protect you." Evelyn's voice trembled slightly, though her words remained steady. "Protect me. You were about to sign papers to send me to a nursing home. If George were alive, your brother would call that cruelty. I gave up everything for you, and this is how you repay me." Ryan opened his mouth to speak, but stopped when the door opened. Sophia walked in, followed by two plainclothes police officers. "Mrs. Harper, I hope we're not too late." Evelyn nodded. "You're right on time." Sophia turned to Laura and Ryan. "We have received a formal complaint for attempted fraud and conspiracy to exploit an elderly person. You have the right to remain silent." As the officers escorted them out, Laura turned back, tears in her eyes. "Mom, I was only trying to help." Evelyn gave a faint smile, one of sorrow and peace. "No, dear, you were only helping yourself." When the door closed, Sophia placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Are you all right?" Evelyn nodded slowly. "I'm not as fragile as they thought." "Thank you, Sophia. I just want to go home now." Outside, the rain had stopped completely. The soft light of late afternoon shimmered on the wet pavement. Evelyn stood watching the police car drive away, her heart heavy, not with triumph, but with grief. She knew that even though she had reclaimed her freedom, the wound of betrayal would never fully heal. Yet as she turned away, walking slowly toward the waiting car, her steps were steady and strong. Evelyn Harper, the woman once dismissed as weak, had returned stronger than ever before. The next morning, Portland woke to a rare sunlight after many days of rain. The air was still damp and cool beneath the trees, but for Evelyn Harper, the world had changed. She sat in Sophia Blake's office, her hands trembling slightly, not from fear, but from relief after the storm. On the desk lay a thick stack of documents stamped in red, legal property ownership, Evelyn Harper notarized. Sophia slid the file toward her. Everything is now sealed and registered in the system. No one, not even family, can transfer or use these properties as collateral. Evelyn's fingers brushed the paper, gratitude and bitterness mingling in her chest. "It's strange," she murmured, "how people only respect you once you can prove you still have value." Sophia gave a faint, sad smile. "Sometimes justice needs paperwork while dignity needs memory, and you've managed to keep both." Leaving the office, Evelyn stood on the sidewalk watching the traffic flow by. She didn't know what to feel: victory, loss, or simply emptiness. In her mind, she still saw Laura and Ryan being led away by the police, an image that lingered like an unhealed wound. They were her family, go cruel as they were still her own blood. But deep down, Evelyn knew that sometimes truth hurts more than betrayal. That afternoon, she visited Clara, who greeted her with a warm embrace. "I read the news this morning," Clara said. "They were really arrested." Evelyn nodded her eyes, wandering to the rain-soaked garden. "Maybe only temporarily. I don't want them in prison. I just want peace." Clara poured tea, the scent of cinnamon and orange filling the cozy kitchen. "Peace isn't easy, Evelyn, but at least now you can choose your own life." They sat quietly by the window, listening to the faint sound of distant cars. Evelyn told Clara about the lakeside house George had left her. "It's a 3-hour drive from here. My brother used to say it was the most peaceful place on earth." "I think I'll go there." Clara squeezed her hand. "You deserve a place like that." Evelyn smiled softly, not to run away, but to begin again. The next day, Sophia drove Evelyn out of the city. The scenery unfolded in shades of green pine forests, open meadows, and finally the winding road along Lake Oswego. When the car stopped in front of a white 2-story villa, Evelyn held her breath. The water mirrored the sky like a vast sheet of glass. The wind carried the scent of damp wood and wildflowers. "This is your home," Sophia said gently. "George told me it was meant for the time you needed peace." Evelyn stepped inside, running her hand along the wooden wall, then over an old framed photo of George hanging in the hallway. Every room was tidy, as if he had just left yesterday. On the living room table sat a small envelope in his familiar handwriting, "For Evelyn when you arrive." She opened it and read slowly, line by line. "If you're reading this, it means you found yourself again. This house, this life, I kept it for you because I knew someday you'd need a place to start over. Live here not to forget, but to forgive yourself." Evelyn folded the letter, tears slipping down her cheeks, yet her lips curved into a soft smile. She sat back in the chair, surrounded by a quiet she hadn't felt in years. In the stillness of the house, there was only the whisper of wind through the curtains and the steady rhythm of her own heartbeat. That afternoon, she and Sophia sat on the balcony overlooking the glowing lake. Sophia poured 2 cups of tea and asked gently, "What will you do next?" Evelyn gazed into the distance. "I'm not sure. Maybe I'll write. Maybe I'll just live. But I want to tell this story not for revenge, but so someone out there going through what I did knows they're not alone." Sophia nodded. "That's the only way to truly heal." When Sophia left, Evelyn stayed behind, alone. Night fell slowly, the lights from the house reflecting on the lake like 1,000 tiny flames. She opened the window and took a deep breath. The scent of freedom was different, not sweet, but pure and crisp, expanding in her chest. In the days that followed, Evelyn settled into her new life. She rose early, sipped tea on the porch, and watched the birds perch on the trees by the water. She tended the garden herself, replanting the lavender bushes George had once loved. Every evening she wrote a few lines in her new journal. Day 1 at Lake Oswego. Peaceful, though sometimes I still hear the past calling my name. One morning, Clara called. Evelyn, I just saw it in the papers. Laura and Ryan have been released on bail, but they're still under investigation. Evelyn was silent for a moment, then said, I know. They'll have to face the consequences. As for me, I just want to let go. Clara sighed. Will you see them again? Not yet. Maybe never. That afternoon, walking along the lake, Evelyn saw a little girl of about 10 playing with paper boats. She bent down to help her retrieve one that the wind had blown away. Thank you, ma'am, the girl said with a bright, innocent smile. Evelyn patted her head, a strange yet familiar warmth filling her heart as if she were seeing Laura again the way she used to be, pure and kind. In that moment, Evelyn realized that forgiveness wasn't for others. It was for herself, so her heart could keep beating without pain. That night, she wrote in her journal, Day 7. I've forgiven them, not because they deserve it, but because I need peace. As darkness fell, the gentle sound of waves brushed against the shore, and wind whispered through the trees. Evelyn Harper, once seen as fragile, now sat strong and steady in her lakeside home, like a pine rooted deep against the storm. She looked out across the shimmering water and whispered, George, I did it. I've kept not just your legacy, but my faith in myself. The moonlight glowed softly across her face, serene and bright. Evelyn closed her eyes, breathing in the cool night air, feeling life return to her chest. Outside, Lake Oswego lay calm, and within that house, for the first time in years, the woman was truly free. A week later, the house by Lake Oswego had taken on Evelyn's breath and rhythm. She rehung the curtains, changed the sheets, and opened every window to let the light pour in. The scent of lavender and pine blended together so sweet and calm that every breath felt like a balm. Each morning she brewed a cup of mint tea and sat on the porch, watching the mist hover over the lake. When the wind stirred, ripples shimmered across the water like George's whispers still lingered there. Yet peace only lasted for the first few days. On a quiet Sunday morning, while Evelyn was watering the plants, the phone rang. Sophia's voice came through, hurried and tense. Mrs. Harper, I need to tell you something. Evelyn set the watering can down, her heart tightening. What happened? Laura and Ryan just hired a new attorney. They're filing an appeal requesting a reassessment of your mental capacity. They're claiming you've shown signs of psychological instability and are petitioning for temporary guardianship. Evelyn froze. Her wrinkled hand clutched the phone until her fingers turned white. I thought it was over. Sophia sighed. I did too, but the law allows them to try again. Still, don't worry. With the evidence we already have, they won't get far. But I need your cooperation on one thing. What is it you'll need to appear in court once more to be evaluated by an independent psychologist? That assessment will serve as the final proof to close the case for good. Evelyn sat down on the porch steps, staring out at the still lake. Its surface was calm, but her heart was churning beneath it. She had thought one battle was enough, but it turned out that the war against human greed had no end. When do I have to go in 2 weeks downtown? I'll go with you, Sophia replied. For now, rest and keep your mind steady. Evelyn nodded, but when she hung up, she realized her hand was still shaking. That afternoon, she walked around the lake, letting the cold wind soothe her thoughts. In her mind, memories of Laura returned like an old film reel. The little girl who once cried over a bad grade, who held her mother's hand at the hospital when her father died, who once promised, I'll take care of you forever. Evelyn couldn't understand what had turned that child into a woman willing to betray her own mother for debt and pride. Was it because she had loved too deeply, yielded too often, trusted too easily in her daughter's goodness? Or was it because she had taught her that love meant giving without limits? That evening, she opened her notebook and wrote, Day 15. I thought I had escaped, but their shadows still follow me. Maybe peace isn't a place but a way of facing the past. The next morning, Clara called. Evelyn, may I come visit? Of course, Evelyn replied, her voice softening. At noon, Clara arrived with a basket of warm pastries and her familiar smile. This house is beautiful, she said, glancing around. You've turned it into paradise. Evelyn laughed gently, though her smile carried a trace of sorrow. Even paradise has intruders, Clara. When Clara heard about the appeal, her face flushed with anger, and she set her teacup down hard. Ungrateful fools, you gave them everything. How can they still not stop? Evelyn looked out toward the lake, her voice calm and measured, because they no longer see the line between need and greed. Clara gripped her hand. You have to fight again, Evelyn, not just to protect your assets, but to teach them a lesson. Don't let them think old age means surrender. Evelyn smiled, her eyes glinting with quiet resolve. You're right. I'm not running anymore. 2 weeks passed in silent preparation. Sophia sent the appointment notice. The evaluation would take place at the city's medical center. Evelyn put on a gray coat, wrapped herself in the wool scarf George had once given her, and stepped into the gleaming glass building. The waiting room smelled of disinfectant, and the clock ticked steadily in the background. Dr. Trevino, the court-appointed psychologist, was an elderly man with silver hair, kind eyes, and a gentle voice. Mrs. Harper, I just want to have a conversation. There's nothing to worry about. Evelyn nodded. He asked the usual questions. Where do you live? Do you remember recent events? Do you know today's date? Evelyn answered each one clearly, then recounted everything that had happened, not with complaint or bitterness, but with truth. When she spoke of the day Laura tried to take her away using a forged medical certificate, her eyes glistened, but her voice stayed steady. She's still my daughter, even if she no longer sees me as her mother. Dr. Trevino studied her for a long moment. Mrs. Harper, I've met many victims of psychological manipulation, but few manage to emerge with their mind this clear. You don't need to prove anything. Evelyn smiled faintly. But I still must. Not just for myself, but for everyone out there being treated as if they're useless. 3 hours later, as they left the building, Sophia held the report in her hands, her eyes bright with relief. The results are excellent. He confirmed you're completely lucid, no signs of cognitive decline. This will destroy all of their claims. Evelyn looked at the papers, her heart finally easing. So it's over now, almost Sophia said. The final hearing will be in 3 weeks. But with this, we've already won. On the way home, they stopped at a small cafe by the river. Evelyn ordered a cup of jasmine tea and watched the current flowing by. Sophia, she asked quietly, have you ever seen people change because of money? Sophia gave a sad smile. Too many times. But I've also seen people change because of love. The question is, which one they choose to follow. Evelyn nodded slowly. Laura chose wrong. But maybe that's my fault too. I taught her that money didn't matter, but I also spent my whole life afraid of not having enough. Maybe she learned that from me. That evening, when Evelyn returned home, she found a small envelope on the porch table with no sender's name. Inside was a single, hastily written note. Mom, I'm sorry. I didn't know what else to do. Please forgive me. There was no signature, but Evelyn recognized Laura's handwriting instantly. She stood there for a long time, then folded the note and placed it on the table. She didn't cry. She only felt a deep, quiet ache in her chest. That night she sat on the porch, listening to the waves lapping against the rocks. Moonlight stretched across the lake, shimmering like memories. She reminded herself that no matter what she had survived, stood tall and reclaimed her dignity, something Laura and Ryan could never buy even with the whole world. She opened her notebook and wrote the final lines of the day 28. I'm no longer angry. Instead of hate, I feel pity. They've lost the most precious thing of all, the ability to love. But I still have my heart, my memory, and the promise of tomorrow's dawn. Outside Lake Oswego was calm as glass. In the softly lit house, Evelyn Harper closed her notebook and smiled. Life might have taken much from her, but it could never take away the strength of a woman who knows exactly who she is. The morning that began the 4th week at Lake Oswego was unusually calm. A thin mist floated above the water, and the sunlight barely broke through the thick layer of clouds. Evelyn woke early, a cup of hot tea in hand, and stepped onto the porch. The sparrows chirping on the roof sounded like greetings to a peaceful day, yet her mind was far from at ease. Today was the day Sophia would call with the date of the final hearing. The phone rang as the clock struck 8. Mrs. Harper's Sophia said, her tone steady but firm. The court has set the date, 2 weeks from now. But there's something else. Laura and Ryan have hired a major law firm from Seattle. They claim to have evidence that you're emotionally unstable. Evelyn let out a quiet laugh. Emotionally unstable. After everything they've done, I'm the calmest person in this story. I know, Sophia replied. They're just grasping at straws. But to be safe, we need to prepare your statement carefully. I want you to tell everything exactly as you lived it, clear, truthful, and without tears. Don't let the court see you as a victim, but as a survivor. Evelyn nodded, her eyes fixed on the lake where light scattered like shards of glass. I understand. They once mistook my silence for weakness. Now I'll show them the strength that silence can hold. After the call, Evelyn sat for a long while reflecting. The strength of silence, those words echoed in her mind all morning. Her whole life she had been silent. Silent when Laura was in debt. Silent when Ryan ordered her around. Silent when they stole her freedom. But this time, her silence would be the loudest accusation of all. That afternoon, Clara called. Evelyn, I just saw the news. They've gone to the media saying you're unstable, forgetful, and made up stories about your property. Evelyn smiled faintly. The same old tricks. But this time, I have proof, and I have me as I am now. Clara asked anxiously, Aren't you afraid? Evelyn shook her head, though she knew Clara couldn't see it. No. I used to fear losing my daughter, my home, my name on a piece of paper. Now I fear only one thing, losing faith that people can still change. That night, Evelyn opened her journal. Each page was a fragment of her life, a record of survival. She reread the first lines, day 2. They planned to sell the house. The handwriting had been shaky, the ink blurred by tears. But now her hand was steady, her pen strong. Day 35, she wrote, I'm ready for court, not for revenge, but for closure. 2 weeks passed quickly. On the morning of the hearing, the Portland sky was thick with gray, and the wind carried the chill of autumn. Evelyn wore a beige suit and wrapped the old wool scarf George had once given her around her neck. As she stepped out of the car, she saw Laura and Ryan standing across the street among a cluster of reporters. Laura looked exhausted, her makeup unable to hide the dark circles beneath her eyes. Ryan appeared composed, but his gaze avoided hers. Sophia walked beside Evelyn and whispered, Stay calm. We have everything we need. Evelyn nodded, her eyes fixed on the towering courthouse, the symbol of justice she had once doubted. Inside, the bright white lights made everyone look pale. The judge was a middle-aged woman, stern but kind-eyed. Laura's lawyer began with a long statement claiming Evelyn showed signs of delusion, that she believed her family was conspiring against her, and that loneliness had distorted her sense of reality. Every word cut into Evelyn like a blade, yet she sat still, her hands clasped tightly together. When it was Sophia's turn, she rose with calm precision. "Your Honor." She began, her voice firm and clear. "I present the following evidence." This is the original recording of a conversation between Mr. Ryan and Mrs. Laura Harper discussing the bribery of Dr. Thompson to falsify a psychiatric report. This is Mrs. Harper's handwritten journal documenting every instance of financial manipulation they attempted. And this, she said, lifting another document, is the report from Dr. Robert Trevino, the court-appointed independent specialist, confirming that Mrs. Harper is completely competent and of sound mind. The room fell silent. The judge reviewed the documents carefully, lingering on the journal for a long moment before looking up. "Mrs. Harper, do you wish to say anything?" Evelyn stood, her voice low but firm. "I once believed silence could preserve peace. I stayed silent when I was insulted, when my rights were taken, when I was treated as a burden. But silence only made them believe I had no voice. Today I speak not to accuse, but to affirm that I am still here, still clear-minded, still a person with the right to live my own life." She paused, turning to Laura. "You chose this path, and I can't save you from it. But I hope one day you'll understand that money will never replace kindness." Her voice trembled slightly, but her eyes did not. Laura lowered her head, her lips pressed tight, while Ryan looked away. The judge set her pen down, her tone firm and final. "After reviewing all evidence and testimony, the court rejects the petition for guardianship. Mrs. Evelyn Harper is fully competent and retains complete legal autonomy. A restraining order between the parties will remain in effect for 6 months. This hearing is adjourned." The sound of the gavel struck the room, sharp, final, and liberating. Evelyn stood still, as if the entire world had gone quiet. Sophia placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You won," she whispered. Evelyn exhaled softly, a faint smile touching her lips. "No, Sophia, justice won." As they stepped outside, a cold wind swept through the trees. Reporters surrounded them, cameras flashing. One voice called out Mrs. Harper. "Do you have anything to say to other elderly people going through what you did?" Evelyn stopped and looked directly into the lens. "Believe that age does not take away your mind, and never let anyone convince you that you are useless. They only fear the strength of those who have endured pain and are still standing." Sophia guided her to the car. On the drive back, they remained silent. Only after leaving the city did Evelyn finally speak. "I don't resent them anymore. They've already sentenced themselves." Sophia nodded. "And you've written an ending they never saw coming." When they returned to the house by the lake, Evelyn stood on the porch for a long time, watching the crimson sunset fade beyond the horizon. The last rays of light reflected in her eyes, brilliant yet serene. She knew her battle was over, not a battle for wealth, but for her voice, her dignity, and her right to live freely. That night, Lake Oswego was as still as glass. Evelyn wrote in her journal for the final time that day, Day 56, "Today the court recognized my competence. But what truly matters is that I have recognized myself. I may be old, but I am alive. And above all else, I am free." A month after the trial, Portland shifted seasons. The leaves began to turn gold, falling gently along the road that circled Lake Oswego. Every morning, Evelyn rose early, brewed her tea, opened the windows to let in the soft sunlight, and sat quietly listening to the water lap against the shore. Her life had returned to a slow rhythm, but now it was the calm of someone in control, not of someone confined. News of the lawsuit between her and Laura had once been a popular topic on local television. Some admired her, others were simply curious, but Evelyn paid no attention. She chose silence distance from the noise. Noise never brought peace. She knew that better than anyone. That afternoon, Sophia came to visit carrying a few documents. Mrs. Harper, she said, this is the final decision from the court. They've denied the appeal. The case is officially closed. Evelyn took the papers, read a few lines, and set them down on the table. I don't know how to thank you, Sophia. Don't thank me, Sophia smiled. You're the one who saved yourself. They sat together on the porch, the lake shimmering with the glow of the afternoon sun. Sophia asked, "What will you do now?" Evelyn gazed into the distance. Perhaps live as if for the first time. I'll write, not to complain, but to tell the stories of those who have been forgotten. Sophia nodded. If you want, I can help you publish it. Evelyn smiled, her voice soft as a breeze. I don't want fame, Sophia. I just want the story to reach those who need it most. That night, she began writing the first book of her life, When the Elderly Say No. Every line was a touch upon the past, the nights she secretly listened to her daughter's schemes, the mornings she pretended to be forgetful, the moments she stayed silent as her future daughter-in-law mocked her. But Evelyn didn't write with anger. She wrote with clarity. She understood that forgiveness didn't erase wrongdoing, but it was the only way to live without being chained to resentment. 3 weeks later, an unexpected call came. The voice on the other end trembled. Mom, it's Laura. Evelyn froze her hand, tightening around the phone. Silence lingered for a long moment before Laura spoke again slowly, as if walking on thin ice. I know you don't want to hear from me, but I just wanted to say, I'm sorry. I've lost everything. Ryan's gone, the company's bankrupt. I have nothing left but debt. But what scares me most isn't being poor, it's losing you. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted to hear your voice one last time. Evelyn didn't answer right away. The wind drifted through the open window, carrying the scent of damp leaves. She closed her eyes, and an image of young Laura returned, the wide-eyed little girl clutching her mother's dress at her father's funeral. Where are you? Evelyn asked softly. In the city, in a small rented apartment. I don't dare come home. That's all right, Evelyn replied. Don't come home. Not because I hate you, but because I want you to learn how to stand on your own. I forgive you, Laura, but forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. You need to remember what you did so you'll never repeat it. On the other end came a choked sob. Thank you, Mom. I just needed to hear that. The call ended. Evelyn set the phone down, tears streaming quietly down her face, though her lips still curved into a gentle smile. She felt something heavy inside her finally release. Later that afternoon, Clara came by with a basket of ripe red apples. I heard about Laura, she said, placing the basket on the table. Evelyn nodded. She called me. I think she's finally beginning to understand. Clara smiled softly. I suppose you forgave her. Yes, Evelyn said, because without forgiveness, who could live? They sat beneath the maple trees, shedding their leaves, the golden light of dusk falling over two silver-haired women. Evelyn told her friend about the book she was writing about her plan to start a support group for elderly women who had suffered financial abuse. I'll call it the Phoenix Circle, she said, a place for those who've been treated as burdens to begin again. Clara squeezed her hand. Evelyn, you didn't just survive. You were reborn. A month later, the Phoenix Circle became real. Every week, Evelyn hosted small gatherings at the city library. Older women who had been deceived by their children, coerced into signing papers, or lost their homes, sat together in a circle listening and sharing. Evelyn told her story, her voice steady, her eyes glowing like firelight. "We are not weak," she said. "We were only made to believe we were." The local paper ran an article titled, "70-Year-Old Woman Launches Movement to Protect the Elderly," but Evelyn cared little for headlines. What made her happy was seeing another woman smile for the first time in years, hearing someone say, "Because of you, I told my children I'm keeping my house." One evening after a meeting ended, Evelyn stayed behind in the quiet library. The last light of day streamed through the glass window, glinting on the final page of her old notebook, the defense journal of Evelyn Harper. She reread the words she had written 2 months before "I am still free." Then she smiled and added a new line beneath it. "I am not just free. I am happy." That night, back in her lakeside home, Evelyn opened the window. The moon was full and bright, its reflection scattering across the water like 1,000 tiny mirrors. The night breeze brushed gently through her silver hair. She whispered into the still air, "George, do you see? I kept my promise." From far beyond the lake came the steady sound of waves blending with the slow, calm breath of a woman who had walked through ruin and still stood strong. In that quiet room, the candle on the table glowed a soft, golden hue. On the wall, George's photograph smiled down, and Evelyn Harper, once deemed too old, too weak, too fragile, now burned like a steady flame in the silent night, warm enough to light the way for a generation of women who had once believed their light had gone out. One late autumn morning, mist blanketed the surface of Lake Oswego. Evelyn woke to the crisp, cool air and slipped on a thick wool sweater before stepping onto the porch. On the table lay the freshly delivered local newspaper, neatly folded, its headline, bold and clear, "Phoenix Circle expands its mission, the Club of Courage." Beneath it was a photo of her smiling gently in the center of a circle of silver-haired women. Evelyn looked at the picture and exhaled softly, feeling both pride and quiet melancholy. That afternoon, as she was tidying up after the weekly group meeting, Sophia called. "I have news, Mrs. Harper. Laura has withdrawn her appeal completely. The court has confirmed the case is permanently closed." Evelyn was silent for a moment before she whispered, "Thank you, Sophia. So it's truly over." "Over, so you can begin again." Sophia replied, "I think you should keep writing." Evelyn smiled. "I am writing, but not for the court this time, for those who haven't yet found their own voice." That evening, Clara stopped by with a bottle of red wine. "I think we should celebrate," she said, pouring 2 glasses. They toasted under candlelight, their laughter mingling with the whispering wind outside. Evelyn looked at her friend and said softly, "I used to think victory meant making them pay. Now I know true victory is living in peace without hatred." Clara nodded. Forgiveness is the strongest way of saying they no longer control your life. Later that night, Evelyn stepped back onto the porch. The breeze brushed through her silver hair, carrying the scent of damp earth and lavender from the garden. The lake shimmered under the moonlight, calm as if no storm had ever touched it. She thought of George, of Robert, of Laura, the people who had given and taken so much from her life. But standing there, in the stillness of night, Evelyn felt no bitterness, only gratitude, because without those losses, she would never have discovered her true strength. She went back inside and opened a new notebook, no longer her defense journal, but her book of renewal. She wrote, Day 82, "I have survived. I have forgiven. I have begun again." Freedom isn't about escaping someone, it's about living fully within yourself. As the last candle on the table flickered out, Evelyn closed the notebook and smiled. The steady ticking of the clock echoed softly in rhythm with her heartbeat. Outside, the sky began to pale with the coming dawn. The woman once dismissed as useless had become a symbol of courage, not because of wealth, not because of fame, but because she had dared to say no when the world told her to stay silent. And in the stillness of that morning, Evelyn Harper understood that life, no matter how late it comes, can always begin again as long as one dares to choose oneself. Winter came softly like a breath. In the early morning, fog blanketed the surface of Lake Oswego, making Evelyn's small house seem as if it were floating in the clouds. She lit a fire in the hearth, the scent of burning wood mingling with the faint aroma of jasmine tea. On the table sat a fresh stack of letters and envelopes from all over their senders, scribbling the same words to Mrs. Evelyn Harper. Each letter carried a story, a confession, a word of gratitude from women who had once been manipulated by their children, husbands, or relatives. They wrote that after reading her story and learning about Phoenix Circle, they saw a part of themselves reflected in her. Evelyn read each line, her eyes stinging, but her heart warm. She was no longer alone. Her story had become a thread connecting hundreds of strangers together. That afternoon, Clara stopped by with a basket of crisp apples. News of you has spread everywhere, she laughed. People are calling you the Winter Flame. Evelyn chuckled, shaking her head. I only told the truth. If that truth helps someone else keep their head held high, then that's enough. Clara looked around the cozy house, her eyes full of pride. You've turned pain into light, Evelyn. Not many people can do that. Evelyn stayed silent, but gratitude swelled deep inside her. George, Sophia, Clara, and all the people who had passed through her life, whether they had hurt her or helped her, were all pieces of what had made her who she was now. A few days later, Sophia drove over, holding an invitation embossed with the logo of the Justice for Seniors organization. Mrs. Harper, she said they'd like to invite you to be the keynote speaker at their conference in Seattle next month. They say your story has become living proof of the fight against financial abuse in families. Evelyn smiled faintly, gripping the card. I've never stood on a stage. I'm just a mother, an old woman who happens to write a few words. Sophia met her gaze, her tone firm. That's exactly why they need you. You don't speak from theory. You speak from truth. When the day of the conference arrived, the auditorium was bright and filled with light. Hundreds sat in silence as Evelyn stepped up to the podium, her thin hands holding a small sheet of paper. She looked around the room, her voice clear but gentle. I am not a victim. I was afraid once. I was manipulated. But I stood up not because I was stronger than anyone else, but because I didn't want to disappear. The audience was utterly still. Evelyn spoke of her life with Laura, of the nights she overheard her daughter plotting to take everything of the moment she finally decided to say no. When I reclaimed my property, she said softly, it wasn't just my house I took back. It was my name. When she finished, she bowed slightly. The applause that followed filled the room long, warm, and thunderous. Evelyn smiled not with pride, but with peace, as if at last someone had truly heard her voice. That night back home, she opened the window and gazed out at the lake. Moonlight spread across the water, glittering like 1,000 tiny mirrors. Evelyn brewed a cup of tea, sat on the porch, and wrapped George's old wool scarf around her neck. She thought of Laura not with anger, but with a quiet wish that her daughter, too, would find peace. Taking out her book of renewal, she wrote the final entry, Day 102. I have walked through betrayal, learned to forgive, and now I only wish to live fully with each sunrise. Freedom is not a gift given by others, but a decision made by oneself. When she set the pen down, she heard the gentle sound of waves outside, the rustle of wind through the trees, the distant hoot of an owl. It felt as though the entire world was whispering with her. Evelyn smiled softly, warmth spreading through her chest. Life had once broken her, but that same life had taught her that the greatest strength does not come from youth, but from the courage to rise again after being hurt by the ones you love most. And to anyone reading these words, she wanted to say, do not fear age. Do not fear weakness. Do not fear saying no, because silence kills faster than time. Tell your story so the world knows you are still here, still living, still free. Leave your message, share your thoughts, or simply write, I understand. Because maybe those words will save someone else lost in the dark, just as Evelyn Harper was once saved by the light she found within herself.